Yogis. And the Native Americans think they're very magical, these humpback whales, and they say that they're from the constellation Sirius. That's Sirius, those two stars up there. So just a little bit about the whales, and you see as you're going by, you'll see that fountain. That's just what a whale looks like when it's blowing water through the blowhole. And they're here because they can eat the Medhaven fish all of a sudden, whereas before they were much too few and too polluted. So let's hear it for the whales. Yay! Okay. So I want to talk about oysters again because oysters are very important in the Native American history of Manhattan. So I said Manhattan is a rocky island where people live. That's what that word means. Okay. And the Hudson River was called the Mohicanituck. We haven't done that yet. So Mo means the greatest of all. Hican means arm of the sea, and Ituk means it's a river that flows both ways. So that beautiful word, Mohicanituck, means the arm of the sea, the greatest of estuaries that flows both ways. So let's go that word by word. Mo, Hican, Ituk.
Ituk.
Now let's do the whole word. It's Mohicanituck.
Mohicanituck.
Okay, that's good. So that's the name of the Hudson. Now, they had lots and lots of oysters in the Hudson, but also in the East River, and then all the way up to probably Washington Bridge, all the to Croton Point, all these oysters. And so they would, it was very hard in February and January to eat. So they would get them in September, and they would smoke them with smoke from fire, and that would preserve the oysters so it wouldn't rot, and they could eat them in February. That's how they stayed alive, because they thought ahead. Okay. Yes. Bye. Oh, hello. So when Henry Hudson came, who is Henry Hudson, by the way?
The one who discovered America and Hudson River.
That's Chris.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean,
He found the Hudson River.
no.
Okay. Well, Verrazano was here long before Hudson. Giovanni de Verrazano. Okay. How do you wave your hands? Giovanni de Verrazano. Okay. So he was a good guy. He almost got to the Hudson, then he turned around, and then I happen to know Henry Hudson came. He was looking to finish what Verrazano started. He landed on Manhattan on his birthday, September 12th, 1609, and they traded for oysters, and he ate one oyster, and he said, "These are the finest oysters in the world," because he was from London. And he was right, because whatever oyster he had, it was either a Blue Point or a Rahway or one of those famous oysters that comes from Manhattan. Well, and so the biggest oyster business was here in Manhattan, started by the Native Americans. They had tons of oysters, and when they would finish, they'd throw them in these piles like Pearl Street was all middens, all piles of shells underneath those buildings, by the way. So they were really good until 1900, and then the people polluted them, and then when they started eating them, they dropped dead, which isn't nice. So they stopped eating the oysters. Okay. So they're trying to bring them back. But so you know, so Stryker's Bay had one of the biggest oyster middens anywhere. Just so you know, a little history there. So this trail that I talked about goes by here, and Croton. I just got to talk about Croton in the final, just 3 minutes. Chief Croatan, or Clonotan, means wind through his hair. The wind blows through his hair, and look at the wind coming up just as I said that. That's his ghost right there. So they also called him Croton, right? And they named Croton, New York, after him because of a place in Italy called Croton, which was very spiritual, if you're following all this. And then he was fighting the British. He had a fort at Croton, and they came in and burned the fort, and he was on the top, standing on the very top of the fort, yelling at the British, "Go away, go away." And they were winning, and they were saying, "Yay, we won." And so he didn't want to hear them say we won. So he jumped into the flames. Very dramatic. As he jumped, he supposedly made a curse in the British. He said, "Someday the Great Spirit will drive you from this land," because you're basically imperialists. So anyway, then that was it. And then the British colonists came in and built a giant mansion all over the burial site and all over the fort site. And guess what? The story is that all the ghosts rose up out of the ground and started marching around the mansion. And those are famously called the walking sachems of Croton Point. Very scary. Okay. And so finally, the war started to develop, and these ghosts were talking to him, and supposedly he said Chief Croton came to him as a ghost and said, "We want you to help drive these British imperialists from this country, drive them back home, and if you do so, we'll stop bothering you and haunting your house." So the story is he joined the American Army as some kind of officer and was instrumental in winning the Revolutionary War for the Americans. Okay, and of course, all this complex history, but that's the legend Croton Point. So now this, not only is this reservoir named after Chief Croton and the Croton people, whose real name was Kitchewan, by the way, the people of the Great Stream, and there's Croton, New York, but also some of this water comes from Croton, New York too. And the story was that, you know, the Dutch, they ruined all their water supplies by putting garbage in them. Bad Dutch, okay, and the British did the same. And so all they had left to drink was at Collect Pond. They had a little Native American spring called Laughing Spring, which was mineral water, and they would drink it. They'd feel so healthy they'd laugh because they're so happy, right? And so then Aaron Burr and some other people came along and put a fence around it, put a pump there, and charged money for everyone to drink the water. The only water in Manhattan, it kept getting more and more expensive until nobody could afford it, and the spring ran out. So then they started bringing water in from way up in Croton to fill this earlier version of this reservoir. And that money that Aaron Burr made was used to start a bank, and some of the other water that money people made was made other banks, and that's how our banking system really got started, was from the water. And now we have the Croton Reservoir, which is basically free. Okay, so it's a wonderful story of the people taking charge of their lives. So that's my story. Thank you very much. You are walking on history, Misery. He's left. Okay, so now we can go back.
Thank you.
Oh yes, I have a reward for you for being so nice.
Because if it's money, I'll be really happy.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is a sweet potato. The sweet potato is a food that Native Americans developed here. And mostly the women, by the way, developed this food. You know, they were the farmers. And then this instrument was made out of clay, and it's called a sweet potato also.
Good job.
So it also plays in 3 melodies at once. That's the short version. Now, see, now we have to go back.
Yes.
Hey, folks.